Welcome to Southwest Yard and Garden. I'm John White. Today we're going to be talking about blackberries, and here in the 100-degree heat of southern New Mexico, who would believe that we would have blackberries growing? With me is Dr. George Dickerson, and George is Extension Horticulture Specialist. Welcome to Southwest Yard and Garden.
Appreciate it, John.
George, tell us a little bit about blackberries. If we're just starting out with them, what do we need to know, and where do we go from there?
Well, like you said, blackberries, when you normally think about them, grow in places like Oregon and very, high rainfall areas and places like this, but they will do fairly well here in the Southwest, both here in southern New Mexico and northern New Mexico, although they're a little bit more sensitive to cold than the raspberry. So they do fairly well here in southern New Mexico. As you can see, they need bee pollination. As you can see, the bees working on these berries here. So one of the things you want to make sure with these things that you don't spray too much insecticide on them unless you absolutely have to, or you're liable to kill off your bee population. One of the things about blackberries as well as raspberries is they have what's called a biennial cane type system. If we look at this cane here, this cane was produced this year. It came up this spring, is now growing this summer. That cane has to go through the summertime, through the cold, and then the following year, on what we call a floricane, it will put on these flowers, which we were looking at here a little bit earlier. And then the flowers, of course, will go ahead and produce this kind of a green-looking berry right here. You can see the stage here. Eventually, they'll start to turn pink, as you can see here. And then the final berry will be kind of this dark purplish type color. Now, you want to, in terms of picking this berry, you want to pick it, if you look real careful at this berry, it's kind of a dull type color. If it's real shiny, it's not ready. Kind of thing. You want this real dull color, that's going to give it the maximum fruit, or maximum sugar content. Now, when we pick this berry, you're going to find that the core becomes part of the edible fruit. This is different than a raspberry because when you pick a raspberry, the core stays on the plant, so you end up with this, what we call a hollow fruit.
Now, we're here at Dan Lowry's farm in Mesilla, and the soils are pretty heavy here. What type of soils do blackberries like?
Well, normally we would prefer to have like a sandy loam, a little bit looser soil, but they will do fairly well in a number of different types of soils. Now, some of the problems that you might run into are weeds, particular perennial weeds like bindweed. There's a number of other types of weeds right around here that you can run into. These perennial weeds can be a major problem on these because they can, particularly bindweed, can wrap around the plants and cause problems. Once in a while you might end up with a problem with iron chlorosis. It's not a real big problem, but if you run into some real alkalinity, you will notice this interveinal chlorosis of the younger leaves. That's a typical sign of iron chlorosis. If we dig back in here a little bit, you can see some of that damage on the cane right there. Some of that is what we call anthracnose. Other things on some of these berries right over here, if we look real careful, they're a little bit blasted here on the ends. And that comes a lot of times from really hot weather or from what we call botrytis. And once in a while you'll see that as a major problem. Now, one of the things that we do in terms of pruning these things is, again, we kind of let these first-year canes just really sprawl and go to town, produce lots of carbohydrates. But then next spring we will cut these back, as you can see right here. And what that does is it forces all the energy into these remaining berries that are on the cane into producing a bigger berry. If you left that cane sticking up like this, you'd get a lot of really small berries and you wouldn't get as good a quality berry. So that's one thing that you want to do with a blackberry is cut it back about a third so that you can concentrate all the carbohydrates from the root system into producing a bigger berry.
Okay. As we kind of finish up here, George, are there some varieties that do better in the southern part of the state?
This particular one is probably Choctaw. It's done fairly well for us, but Kiowa is a really nice variety. It produces a very large type berry. And some people also, there's some also some varieties which are thornless. You can see there's thorns on these varieties here. Some people don't like that, but varieties like Black Satin do a real good job for us for the home gardener because they don't have thorns. A lot of people don't like that particular characteristic.
Okay.
One other thing we'd like to do is put these under drip irrigation. Well, let's see along here, you'll see some drip irrigation. That way we help save water and you don't have as many weeds out here in the aisles because you're not putting water out there.
Okay. Well, George, thank you very much for the tips today, and come back on Southwest Yard and Garden again.
Thank you.